our elder brother, Gary Abraham.
Do we serve a living, loving God?
Yes, we do.
I'll try to get through this without. Yes, somehow it never works as I intended. But anyway, it's amazing to see all of you, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak. I started out last week praying and preparing what should I speak about. And of course, there's so much to speak about. So, so what is today's date? September 1st. Beginning of a new month, and also the beginning of a new season. And so that's what I, kind of the theme of my my talk is we're moving from season to season to season in our life, in our life, in our family, in our movements. Father always talked about the seasons, and it was amazing when I started thinking about this theme. I had 3 or 4 people started talking about, oh, now it's becoming fall. This is the best time to be in Ohio. And I thought, actually I've had that thought, not about Ohio, but wherever I lived. A lot of times the best season is the fall. And it's the season that we reap what has been sown, what has grown over the summer, and prepare for the winter. And so fall is an amazing time. In some places I lived, it was Tennessee and New England and New Hampshire. It's definitely the most beautiful time of the year. And we get beauty because things are beginning to not die, but to transition to their winter being. So I'd like to ask, where is he? Dr. Reese? Is he here? Oh, could you go ahead? Come on up here.
This Bible quote is coming from Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. The word that reads thus: do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcend all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. Amen?
Amen. Amen. So then, as I was thinking about what to speak about, when I drive around town and on my way to and fro, I like to listen to the Christian radio station. And there's probably several here, but I found one. And as soon as I turned it on Monday morning, as I was preparing for my sermon, it said, the pastor talked about this verse. Don't be anxious. Never be anxious. If you're with God, you don't need to be anxious. God will take care of everything. All you have to do is allow God to use you. So, one of the hardest things for me to do is speak publicly. You may not know that, but yes, that's been always a difficulty for me. When I was growing up, I was an athlete, and I always determined not to talk, but to do. And so I'm going to show you, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to you, and not broadcast it. So today in sports, it's a little bit different, and they like to talk big. We used to call it, when I was growing up, and Pastor Reese knows this, when you talk a lot, then they say you have all show and no go. And in Texas, they say, this guy has a big hat, but no land. So that's what happens if you talk first. So, anyway, I was thinking about, I read many things, and I got so filled with the Spirit. But I talked to my children, and I asked them, what should I speak about? And my grandchildren. And they gave me some good ideas. And especially my eldest, well, she's not my eldest granddaughter, but my eldest granddaughter here, Tiffany. Some of you may know, she said, Dad, Opa, she calls me Opa, tell people your story. That's what you should do. So I said, okay, that's a good idea. So I asked, you told me, so that's what I'm going to talk about this morning. I've been in this community for 1 year, and I came here 1 year ago, and God told me when I arrived, don't talk, just listen. And so that didn't mean not to, say hello or, just pleasantries, but God told me, as my youngest son always tells me, Dad, don't pontificate. So that's what God was telling me. Don't pontificate. Just listen. I gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. So I want you to just listen for 1 year and say very little. And so that was my determination. Even with my family, I was pretty quiet and just listened. And but guess what? It's 1 year is over. So now I can pontificate. But I'm doing it slowly. And I was really amazed when Pastor Gloria asked me. I had been communicating with Dr. Mickler, and I said, "Hey, you're in town. Why don't you give a sermon?" He said, "Well, Then he called me the next day and said I can talk about Japan. And so at that time, I was trying to communicate with Pastor Gloria. She said, well, I already have a schedule. And she thought I was asking if I can give the sermon. And I wasn't at all. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't looking forward to it anyway. But it was on Dr. Nickler's behalf. And so he gave a beautiful presentation about Japan. And so hopefully you were here. So, okay, I'm going to move forward here. And also that song, when I started thinking about my sermon, that was a famous song in the 60s by the Byrds, and it's from the Bible. And I was telling my granddaughter my early life when I first met God and had a rebirth experience, that God had prepared so many things. And a lot of things God prepared was through the culture and the music at that time. So as Robert spoke to us here, I was also a hippie. But I was a good hippie, not a bad hippie. So good hippies were trying to build God's kingdom. That's what we were all about. We didn't see it happening in the world, and we thought, okay, someone should do it. So that's what we were all about in the 60s before I met the church. But I want to go back a little bit earlier till when I was 13. So when I was 13, it was very popular, particularly with Bob Dylan. He said never trust anybody over 30. And also there was a perception when I was going to school that there is no God. God doesn't exist. So I went home one day, and my dad was an amazing guy. He used to get up at 4 o'clock every morning and study. He'd read the Bible and all kinds of religious books. And I really admired him. I didn't do it, but I admired that he did it. And he set a really good example for me. But he became the person that I could always talk to, be really honest with. And so I went to him one day when I was 13, and I said, you know what? I don't believe in God. And he said, oh, interesting. Let's sit down and talk about this. So he told me very simply, and actually Father gives the same message. He said, okay, so did you create yourself? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, okay, so where do you think you came from? Well, I don't know. And so he said, I said, but I know it wasn't from a guy with long, white hair and a long beard and sitting on a throne. I know that's not where I came from. So my father said, okay, so think about where you came from. If you didn't create yourself, how did you come to exist? And so I thought about it, and I told him, well, at that time it was very vague, energy or, something like that. I mean, I was 13 years old. So. Then my father said to me, okay, so wherever you think you came from, that's your creator. And your creator is God. I said, oh, wow, I do believe in God. So that was pretty simple. He, it's not complicated for a 13-year-old. And so I was pretty typical growing up. Whenever I'd get in trouble, I used to go and petition God, can you help me out here? If you do help me out, then I'll believe in you. So that was my, anyway, that's the way I dealt with God. then after I realized that I do believe in God, and I promised him all these times that I'll believe in you if you help me out, and he always came through, then I decided, okay, so now that I know there's a God, and that God is always helping me, then I want to know God better. So one day after school, I went out to a park near our house, and I said, God, I want to know you better. What should I do? And God told me, okay, thank you, and I want you to walk with Jesus. And not in front of him, not behind him, but hand in hand. And I was a Jew. So I had gone to synagogue. So, that was new for me. So the town I lived in was about 85-90% Jewish. It was a wealthy town, so there were some churches there, and they were big churches. But, I never went near them. So when God told me walk hand in hand with Jesus, I said, okay, well, I guess I got to go find Jesus and walk with him. So I went to the biggest church in our town. And I went in, and I just didn't feel Jesus at all. And I walked out after everything was over, and I said, Jesus, where were you? I went there to find you, and you weren't there. And he said, yeah, they won't let me in. So I was amazed. When I tell our pastors that story, they just shake their head. And when I was talking to so as I was reflecting to my granddaughter about those things, I told her that my father had converted the guy who I respected so much from Judaism to Christianity, but not normal Christianity. He became a Christian Scientist, and which is kind of a more intellectual religion. You probably don't know much about it, but it's pretty amazing. And as I was telling my granddaughter this story, I had this, a little side note here. She's going to, with her family, to a local Christian church right now. So I want to, try to convince her that, where can she find God? So I told her that it's amazing, now that I'm telling you this story, God knew that I would be very uncomfortable being a Jew to go to a regular Christian church. And so instead, he gave my father Christian Science, which was kind of a midway position. And it helped me to recognize who Jesus was and how Jesus was working in my life. And so I went to, and I loved the Christian Science Church. We had so many activities, so much fun. I went to Sunday school. I didn't go to the regular church service. I went to the Sunday school and we studied the Bible. And it was a really good introduction for me to Christianity. And when I told my granddaughter about this, I realized, as we look at our life, how much was God loving me? And how much was he taking care of me? And we all have that story, right? That God, how much did God prepare me? And gave me a path and helped me along it. And so I realized, again, how amazing God is. So, in those days, I used to spend a lot of time in the creation because I didn't like people so much, but I could find God in the creation. So I hiked all the time, I mountain climbed, and also, as I said, I was an athlete, and that way I could express physical things, but find God in them. So, but as I tell the story, I'm reminded how much God loved me and prepared me. And that was, I've been in the movement for 50 years. And at the time I joined, it wasn't even called the Unification Church or the Family Federation. It was called the Unified Family at that time. And so I was living in God sent me to find him to the Rocky Mountains, Wyoming. And when I went out there, the reason I went is because that's where I experienced God. And the bigger the mountain, the bigger the ocean, the bigger, the more beauty that was there, the more I could find God. I'm sure Robert can relate to this. So, I was not given the gift of gab. My gift is intuition. I just feel I should do this or do that. And I don't know why. I can't explain it until afterwards. So this is the way God has always worked in my life to God, the spirit world gives me an inspiration, and I go with it. And then I find out. So when I was in college in New Hampshire, I ran into a guy that was in my class, and he was also on a spiritual journey. So both of us we were in the mountains of New Hampshire, and at that time, we spent a lot of time in the creation. But we would do things and ask for God's help and guidance. And as I said, as an intuitive person, it wasn't specifically, it was just, God, if you want me to do this, give me a sign. And then all of a sudden the radio would turn on by itself. Or the windshield wiper would go on time. And this was our experience. And we just were amazed how God worked in our lives. One day we went to visit a friend of ours from New Hampshire to Long Island. And we had no idea what this guy's address was. So we just went there. We said, we're going to find him. How are you going to find him? So I said, okay, let's really pray about this. How can we find this brother? So I said, okay, let's pull into this shopping center here. And it was this huge shopping center in a big town in Long Island. And I said, okay, let's just stop here and think about it. Think about it. And then 1 minute later, you drove right in front of us and just showed up. So this is the kind of experiences that I was having on a daily basis if I asked God for guidance or help. So then, God works in mysterious ways, right? So I was working in New York City shortly after that, and I knew I needed to leave, so I went to the Rocky Mountains. And I received a revelation before I went there. Why should I go there? I received a revelation that the Messiah is on the earth. And so I showed up in Laramie, Wyoming, in the middle of nowhere. And 6 months after I got there, I met the church. And remember, I was always looking, seeking God. God, show me what I should do. And so when I met this IOWC team that was going through Wyoming, which, there's nobody in Wyoming. I mean, they probably doubled the population by coming there. So when they met me, actually there were all these books I was reading on Christian mysticism. That was what I was studying at the time to help me understand God more. And also Middle Eastern mysticism, the Sufis and the whirling dervishes and all, from the Middle East, all those. So I was open to any kind of mysticism, not just Christian, but also Middle Eastern, and also I studied Zen at that time. So when I went to Wyoming, God told me, just go there and prepare I said, well, what can I do? He said, I met this Buddhist man in New Hampshire. I said, I'm going to Wyoming. And he said, okay, so what are you going to do there? And I said, I don't know, what should I do? And he said, purify your heart. The Beatitude says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So I felt, okay, this is really a sign from God. So I moved up to the mountains, 9,000 feet, no electricity, no telephone, no nothing. I just lived there and mountain climbed and hiked every day. Once a week, I would go to the campus and I would see who came to town to speak. Because I didn't want to just give up. I lived in New York for a long time and the East Coast. So there's a lot of culture there. I didn't want to just give up all culture. But in Wyoming, there's very little culture. So then I met this girl that in the student union at a book table for the Unified Family. And she had all these books that I had read on mysticism on her table. And I said to her, have you read all those books? She said, well, I haven't, but the people I live with have. And I said, wow, this is really, really God. This is really God. So I'm going to end there. And but I got the inspiration in giving this sermon. Father always told us, and Mother tells us, that we should be writing our memoir. And for my grandchildren, I tell them you should what's it called when they write every day? A journal. I tell them, write your journal and write it every day. So I wish I would have all these journals, as some of our members do, but I'm going to have to kind of start from scratch. So this talk that I'm giving is my chapter 1 of my story. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. Most of you don't know me. Maybe you know my children more than me. Garen, and I don't know how much you know Luke, but my children. So I wanted you to get to know me, and I wanted to explain a little bit. And I also want to say that most of my time in 50 years, I was a leader because we were all leaders. There was nobody except leaders. So, not that many people were around. So we all had to do everything. And but the advantage of that is we were like the firstborn in America of true parents. And the firstborn always has a difficult life, but also has many blessings. And so we had so many blessings that I was just reading the other day, as I was preparing this, David Kim in the 50s was talking about how the early Koreans came to America, but they were just here in preparation for Father to come and educate America. And so when I joined, Father came around the same time, and Father educated us. And that was our experience. So Father would meet us once a month as state leaders and teach us how to tie our tie, how to buckle our pants, how to eat, how to even go to the bathroom. Father practically taught us everything. And we know from divine principle that Adam and Eve should have done this had they not fallen for their children. And one final thing I want to leave you with, I think, one final thing is during some difficult time in our movement with the true children, Father talked to one of his children and in a big group 3 times. And he said, I put this, calligraphy in East Garden. When you walk in, when you leave, you have to see it. And the calligraphy said, resolving the resentment of heaven and earth. And so he was telling one of his children and couple, this is your job, to resolve the resentment of heaven and earth. And when Father said that, I said, well, okay, so what is the resentment of heaven and earth? I never thought about that. Does anyone know what God's greatest resentment is? Any guess? Huh?
Couldn't have grandchildren.
You got it. Okay, chicken dinner for you. Yeah, God could never see his grandchildren. And what was the resentment of earth? That means man. What is our resentment? I mean, you all have it, so you should know that. That we didn't have parents. We didn't have parents. So God never had grandchildren, and we never had parents. So those are the 2 resentments that will usher in, solving them, will usher in the kingdom of heaven. So, one final thing. I want to read something. Actually, there's a lot I want to read, but I'm not going to. So, I was wondering this morning as I was preparing this, is this what I should be talking about? And then I ran across this brother. I know his parents. I don't know him so well. His name is Elijah Maddox. And Elijah gave this testimony about testimonies. And it's an amazing thing, really. And let's see if I can find this. It's what Mother said. Father and Mother both. Oh, okay. So here's Mother's words about giving testimonies. And Father used to tell us Sunday service should be your testimony. And that's what the whole Old Testament and New Testament is. Testimony about how God is working. And so our lives should be a testimony about how God is working in my life. And we all have different experiences. God works differently with everybody. But we want to show that God is alive. God is real. God is involved. God is with us. So Mother says, let's see. Here we go. Yes, I never wore glasses before, about 10 years ago. Started having trouble seeing. All right. So don't let doubt stop you, is what this brother said. This is Mother's words. No one should belittle his or her life. We should deeply realize that everyone is a precious being born through the sacred workings of the universe. So none of us are a mistake. We all have a purpose. And when Facebook first started, when people had birthdays, what I would say is you were born for a great purpose. If you don't know what it is, find it. If you know what it is, do it. So that was my birthday greeting to everybody. So all of you, you were born for a great purpose. And God is waiting for your response. God bless you. So please join me in prayer.